Today we look at Hyun Park, who was former #1 LPGA player some 5 years ago, who has fallen into a state of oblivion. We're going to look at some stats that separate these 5 years, then we're going to compare a swing from that same time frame, and we're going to look at some evidence to see that she fell down this rabbit hole of the great shallow effect. Let's go. Good morning, Land Golf Academy members. So let's get right to the statistics first, which is the most important part. So we're going to look at evidence of where her game has suffered and try and break it down. I'm approaching this from a teaching aspect. I'm not sure what she's going through in her life. It could be something personal. It could be an injury. So I'm going at this purely from an instruction standpoint and a swing coach. So keep that in mind. So in 2017, she had 2.3 million, ranked #1. This year, she's at 69,000, ranked number 142. Driving distance is 270 in 2017 versus 255 this year. Driving accuracy is about the same, so she's lost some distance, but look at the greens in regulation. She went from 75.75%, which is quite high, top 10, versus 63.5%, so she has dropped 12%, which is quite substantial because now her ranking is 130th. Her putts in regulation is 0.05 difference between the two, so that equates to about 0.9 shots every round, so it's about 1 to 4 shots difference for the tournament week if she makes the cut. Her putting average has gone from 29.5 to 30.16, so again about a half a stroke difference. So all in all, let's say her putting has cost her about a stroke per round. Now we go all the way down to sand saves, 45% to 40%. This is where it gets a little bit remarkable here. So birdies 388 5 years ago versus 153. Rounds in the 60s. 5 years ago she had 48. This year she has 8. And the biggest one to talk about is scoring average. 5 years ago was 69.25, which is ranked #3. This year it is 73.12, which is ranked 142nd. So to put that in perspective, look at the difference between the #1 versus the dead last. It's only 4 strokes difference. Now that doesn't sound like much, but when you're at the upper epsilon of the world, that's 16 strokes behind first place if you make the cut. So we can see there's something dramatically wrong. The biggest thing I see on this list is the greens and regulations. So we're going to take a look at an iron swing and compare the two of them. Now keep in mind, I had to scour the internet to try and find similar points of view and get the years correct. So we're working with what we have. Let's check it out. Okay, so on the screen, the left side is going to be her older swing. The right side is going to be her newer swing. We're going to look at 3 areas today. We're going to look at the setup. We're going to go to the top of the swing, and then we're going to go straight from the top to impact to look at how she used her motions before and the differences today. But initially, we can see a lot more forward lean in the current setup, and we do see evidence of this. Let's get our favorite Barney purple up there, and we draw it straight up to the sky, right in the center of the heels, straight up to the sky, so we can see more of her upper body is leaning forward. And the problem with this is now that shifts her weight towards her toes versus the left side, it is more centered. Now we're going to see some issues with this as she unwinds in the golf ball, specifically being very toe based. Now she needs this because she has to get a little bit more clearance room because more of her upper body's over the ball. Okay, let's go straight to the top of the swing because we can see some glaring differences, most notably where that club shaft is. So the left side of the screen, we can see that club shaft is almost on the same line with her left arm, where now we have a little breaking point here. So I could not for the life of me find 2 face-on views, so we're kind of stuck with this down the line, but we can do our best job to piece it together. We can also see if we draw a line from the back of her hip straight down on the new one versus the back of the hip straight down on the old one, we can see there's definitely more room on the old one, which is a sign again that she is more centered in her weighting. This will change a couple things. We can see the first change is going to look at that triangle and where it is sitting in relation to her body, and then we're going to look at how she utilized that triangle correctly. So if we draw a straight line straight down versus a straight line straight down, we can see that club on the left side is more out in front of her body, where the club on the right side has fallen back to the right side of her body just slightly. But if you notice the angle, let's change the angle color and let's move this to our favorite Barney purple. If we draw it straight down the center, that's a horrible center. So let's redraw that one and go straight down the center to where it would run into the plane versus the new one to where it will run into the plane. They kind of run into the plane in the same area. So the only visual difference I see here is the angle of the triangle on the the left side is more vertical versus the triangle on the right side is starting to tip a little bit to her plane. So visually, the one on the right, okay, that looks a lot better, but is it functional? Because here we have a situation where somebody on the left side has found a way to make this downswing work. So where we're going to start keeping track of where that club head is. So we clearly see a difference where the shaft is, and one is more vertical, the other one's more horizontal. Now let's keep in mind of the action of the shaft. So we're going to go frame by frame. We're going to redraw these, and we're going to see what happens if we do frame by frame. One more there. We can see this one's falling right in between the two slots. This one, guess where it's going? Shallow territory. So when you shallow things out, it might not always work, because if you take a look at the old motion, look at the way the club shaft fell into the slot pretty quickly, and then she can rotate around that. Versus now, on the right side, you can see there's a little bit more going on with the club shaft. If you take a look at what's happening on the left side versus the right side, if you look at the footing, look at the right foot on the old swing versus the right foot on the new swing. Remember, she is toe-based because of that new setup that she has, with the majority of her weight on the front part of her foot. Once it's on the front part of the foot, you either make up for that on the way back by pushing the weight back to your heels, or you stay on your toes, and she is elected to stay on her toes. Now let's go a couple more frames over. There's past impact. One more frame. We still see that this club shaft is still pretty close to all these lines, where the one on the right side, the club shaft is already passed through, and the first evidence of the club shaft coming out now runs perfectly parallel between the two lines versus the one on the left. You can see where it comes out here, it is still pretty parallel to all these lines. So just by looking at these lines, which one do you think can become more repetitive? I would venture to say the one on the left, because there's just less going on with her club shaft. The one on the right, you can argue that these are better positions, but the shaft is moving, and this will play a part in the long run at that upper epsilon level. So we're just going to look at this over and over again, and look at the one on the left side versus the one on the right side. Visually, you can see how the club works its way more up and down on the right side versus the one on the left side works more around the body. It's staying connected throughout the entire motion, where the one on the right side seems like the body wants to go left, but the arms and hands are going up and down. Now, when they go up and down, when the body's going left, that to me can provide some inconsistencies, and we saw it when we started to trace that club shaft all the way through. And this frame says it all. So we see the club shaft right in the center of the two planes, where the one on the right side, we can draw that line. You can see how the club head is veering to that lower plane quicker. This would be pretty good for a driver, and we can see her driver accuracy hasn't really suffered, although her distance has suffered some 15 yards. But the biggest thing is for irons. Irons you typically would like to hit a little steeper, and when your hands are coming a little bit higher, they are going to be steeper and more connected with the body as she turns through. So yes, the one on the left side does promote more active hands past impact. The one on the right side might promote less active hands, and some might consider this position laid off, but in all reality, it's closer to that plane, and she's developed that in a neurological system. And when you take somebody that has active hands that have learned how to do this motion and apply it to a shallowing effort where you get the hands more up and down, this can create an instant disassociation with what she knew versus what she has now. So two things can happen. She can just fall off into an even more oblivious state until she decides to pursue her old swing, or she might ingrain this and she might make a comeback with this newer motion. Time is yet to tell us, but I hope you can see the difference between the two, specifically right at impact, and we can see how much of the hips are engaged. The weighting is more stable, so this left foot is more on the ground. The left foot here, you can see this left toe's coming up in there, the right foot's coming up, so there's just a little bit too much of this lower body firing insufficiently, causing a little bit of disassociation. And if you take a look at that spine angle retention, look at the one on the left side, she's more in her spine angle. Look at the one on the right side, she has less in her spine angle, she's losing it. I'm not sure if her design was to go shallow, but I would imagine that she tried to make this change. For what reason, I don't know, unless you can see the risk that you're taking. Now obviously her risk is much greater than yours and mine, because we don't make a living playing golf. So if you find yourself in a position where you're hitting the ball great, don't do anything. Even if your swing is unconventional, wait until you have a few bad rounds in a row and then go to somebody for a quick little checkup. It might be a total swing overhaul, or it might be a band-aid. Typically band-aids do fall off, but at least it will help you from going down this rabbit hole. I hope this helps you, and I hope you can understand what these top level elite athletes are trying to do. They're trying to perfect their swing, but sometimes the risk just is not worth it. I wish her the best of luck, and I hope her new swing works out for her, but I would not be surprised if I saw her resort back to her older swing that got her there in the first place. Hope that helps you, everybody. See you next time. Fairways and greens.